In this video, we are going to go over the corresponding angles postulate and a theorem dealing with one of the definitions from the last video, and that theorem is the Alternate Interior Angles Theorem. But first, let's start with the corresponding angles postulate. The corresponding angles postulate is the 12th postulate that we're going over in this geometry series. And it says that if two parallel lines are intersected by a transversal, then the corresponding angles are congruent. So here we have two parallel lines, x and y, that are cut by a transversal z. The corresponding angles are congruent. So that's saying that angle A is congruent to angle E. Angle B is congruent to angle F. Angle C is congruent to angle G. And angle D is congruent to angle H. And that's what this postulate is saying. Now we're going to go over the alternate interior angles theorem, and then we'll write a proof for that. Alternate interior angles theorem, or we're going to abbreviate that as T7, says that if two parallel lines are intersected by a transversal, then each pair of alternate interior angles is congruent. So let's draw a picture again. So, if two parallel lines, we have two parallel lines, x and y, and they're cut or intersected by some transversal z, then each pair of alternate interior angles is congruent. So what this is saying is that C is congruent to F, and D is congruent to E. The alternate interior angles are congruent. Now let's go ahead and do a proof for this. We have our statement and reason column, and we're going to start with what is given. We have that line X is parallel to line Y, and line Z is a transversal. And that is given. Now in this next step, we're going to use our corresponding angles postulate. And from that, we're going to be able to say that angle C is congruent to angle G, and angle D is congruent to angle H. And that's because of the postulate we went over earlier in this video, the corresponding angles postulate. So we have that C is congruent to G and D is congruent to H. But what we need to prove is that C is congruent to F and D is congruent to E. But you can see that E and H and F and G are vertical angles and therefore also congruent. So our next step would be to use the vertical angle theorem to say that angle G is congruent to angle F and angle H is congruent to angle E. So now we have C is congruent to G and G is congruent to F. So let's go ahead and use the transitive property. D is congruent to H is congruent to E, therefore D should be congruent to E. So, by using the transitive property for congruent angles, we can say that angle C is congruent to angle F and angle D is congruent to angle E. C is congruent to F, D is congruent to E, and that's what we needed to prove. If two parallel lines are intersected by a transversal, then each pair of alternate interior angles is congruent. The alternate interior angle theorem.